Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video, we will be previewing Game Week 23. We've actually had blank Game Week and double Game Week 25 announced now. We've got a blank Game Week 28, but we also have the double Game Week right in front of us. So there are lots of key decisions to make. Do we look short term? Do we look long term? And which assets should we be bringing in? If you are enjoying the content here on this channel, please do remember to like, comment and subscribe. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So before we look specifically for Game Week 23, today, at the time of me recording this, we have just had announced a double Game Week 25 for Arsenal, Everton, Liverpool and Wolves. And remember, as you can see at the bottom of your screen, we already have a blank game week for Manchester United, Newcastle, Brentford and Brighton. Now, this doesn't happen that often where we have quite a big blank, but also quite a big double at the same time. So 4 teams doubling, 4 teams blanking. It makes it a little bit messy, especially when we take into account blank Game Week 28, which we will discuss in today's video as well, and double Game Week 23. But these are the 4 teams that potentially you want to start looking at for Game Week 25, because not only do they not blank, but they've also got an extra fixture too. A couple of them are slightly better though, because we also know they'll play in blank Game Week 28. And that is Arsenal and Everton. So Arsenal and Everton are guaranteed a double in 25 and also to play in blank Game Week 28. Of course, Arsenal also double in 23. So with Arsenal, you're getting double 23, double 25 in a week where other teams blank. And we know that they will play in Game Week 28. Everton obviously don't have the double this week, but they will double in 25 and they are guaranteed to play in Game Week 28 as well. So I think Arsenal and Everton are definitely 2 teams worth considering. Obviously, we know Arsenal are fantastic, but this confirms for me 2 things. Number one, you want a triple up on Arsenal. But even more so now, you want the correct triple up. Because they've got so many extra fixtures and because we're going to be holding this triple up until at least Game Week 28, it's worth now potentially taking a -4, maybe even a -8 hit to get in the Arsenal assets that you want. And it's probably changed my thought process. I've got Ben White and Martinelli, which we'll discuss in the next section, Arsenal assets. And I'm really considering selling one, if not both, because I'm not convinced now that they're the best Arsenal assets to own. And with all of these doubles coming up and the fact that we know they're playing in the blank weeks, I think having the best Arsenal triple up you can is important. Leicester away and Everton away in Game Week 25 looks perfect. Everton, I think there are assets to consider, namely Tarkowski, I think is a really good option at 4.2 million. So he could be really nice because he covers you for double 25 in the blank. For example, if you've already got a Brighton or a Brentford, or maybe you want to sell Luke Shaw or Botman, you could go to Tarkowski, who plays in 25 doubles. I know it's not the best double because it's Arsenal away, but also plays in blank Game Week 28 as well. So I really like Tarkowski as an option, which we'll discuss a bit later as well. And then the other 2 teams that play, or I should say double in Game Week 25, are Liverpool and Wolves. And both of them decent. Crystal Palace and Wolves for Liverpool, and then Fulham and Liverpool for Wolves. It really depends on what Liverpool turns up, of course, but the Liverpool of late, that's actually not a bad double for Wolves, Fulham and Liverpool. I've actually changed Liverpool to grey because they are still classed as a difficult fixture on the FPL site, but I don't think at the moment anyway, they're a particularly difficult fixture. They're still creating chances and they still look like they'll score goals, but they're definitely not defending very well. So I wouldn't mind picking up a couple of Liverpool assets potentially. We will discuss Darwin a little bit later. If you already own Salah, it's probably worth holding on. I don't think there are many Liverpool assets, even if you somehow still own like a Robertson or a Trent. I don't think there are many Liverpool assets that I would be looking at and thinking, I want to sell them with a double game week coming up and okay fixtures in 23 and 24. So I feel like if you've kept Salah this long, or you've kept Darwin this long, you've probably got to hold on to them. And I'll show you a wildcard draft at the end. I would probably have at least one of them on a wildcard draft. Now, I don't think we need to rush out and buy triple Liverpool. I'll be honest, there's very, very little chance I own more than 1 Liverpool asset, maybe 2 for this double, just because they're very, very expensive and Liverpool haven't been performing well. And when we've already got other players that have decent fixtures and the likes of Arsenal that have a double game week, we've already got our captaincy covered. I don't think you need to rush out there and buy them. I think one of Darwin and Salah, maybe both, will be absolutely fine. If you want to avoid them altogether, I completely understand the justification. Wolves are tricky. You're probably looking at someone like a Cody, maybe a Dawson, if he looks like he's going to be nailed on there. So there are some options. Not Cody plays for Everton. Kilman or Dawson as the options for a defensive asset from Wolves. I'm not necessarily sure I would go out there and buy an attacker from Wolves. I know there's a few people mentioning the cheaper midfielders, but for me, you're probably looking at one of the centre-backs if you don't like Tarkowski, or maybe alongside Tarkowski. So these are the players that I would be considering from these teams. The key thing for me is you want to be tripled up on Arsenal, maybe considering a cheaper defender from Everton or Wolves or Wolves, looking at maybe one of Darwin and Salah, and then just remembering that we also have Man United, Newcastle, Brentford and Brighton that are all blanking in 25, and we want to start selling those assets slowly. So maybe, like I said, you start to look at selling a Botman or a Luke Shaw for someone like a Tarkowski, or go to an Arsenal defender, or maybe someone, like I said, a Dawson or a Kilman. So That's my thoughts on double game week 25. Let's now move on to looking at Arsenal and Man City assets and focusing specifically on double game week 23. So as I said, Arsenal double in 23, double in blank game week and double game week 25, and also a guarantee to play in game week 28. They probably won't double in 29, but you can at least hold 3 Arsenal assets up to 28. And over the next few weeks, they've got 2 double game weeks. So it is 100% worth investing in 3 Arsenal assets. And I think it's absolutely critical because they are the best team in the league and because you can get so much value from them over the next few weeks. It is worth trying to get on the best Arsenal triple up. So what is the best Arsenal triple up? What I've got on your screen is some of the data, projected points, I've got their price, and then I've got their big chance involvement and non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90 post World Cup. So we've actually got 6 game weeks worth of data now. I think that's just about a big enough sample size to maybe start looking post-World Cup. Because the break over the World Cup, it was almost like the start of a new season. Maybe not quite. But I do think if possible, it's better to look post-World Cup. There have been changes in management, changes in tactics, certain players being injured. So here we've got game week 17 to game week 22. So I'll start with the 4 defenders very briefly. I think that all 4 are fine. White, Zinchenko, Gabriel, Saliba. I do think that White is a real minutes risk at the moment. I don't necessarily think that Tomiyasu will start many games ahead of him at the moment, but I do think there is a possibility that Tomiyasu starts one of the next 5 or 6 games for Arsenal, and all of a sudden there you've lost one fixture for Ben White, and he's probably likely to come off the bench. And I think that you're definitely prone to early substitutions. Now, if those substitutions happen post 60 minutes, it genuinely might be an advantage. We've seen in the past, I remember it happened for me with Castagna. Castagna was subbed off like in the 60th minute or the 61st minute. So just after the clean sheet was banked, Leicester then conceded. Castagna kept the clean sheet and got 1 bonus point. So he came away with 7 points when everyone else's defenders came away with nothing. So I think that if he is subbed post 60, it's not necessarily an issue. But of course, you just don't want the added stress. And if he is subbed a couple of times before the 60th minute, all of a sudden you've lost the clean sheet. So considering also, as you can see here, his data post-World Cup has been really poor. He's not getting involved in the chances. 0 big chance involvement, 0.02 non-penalty expected goal involvement. For me, Ben White is the worst of the popular Arsenal assets to own. And I'm personally looking at potentially selling him if I can get away with it, because I think there are also other issues that I've got to deal with in my team. So if you're in a luxury position or you just don't mind taking a hit, I don't mind selling Ben White. You can sell him for another defender or move to the triple attack. With the other defenders, I think that Saliba is the most expensive and arguably maybe doesn't justify that. I think it's because he scored a couple of goals early on. Yes, he's nailed. He is slightly better than Gabriel for bonus points. But across the season, Gabriel's got better data. And we know that Gabriel is a real goal threat, whereas Saliba makes up a little bit of that through expected assists. So I think they are virtually identical, but I slightly prefer Gabriel because he's a little bit cheaper. He's a little bit less prone to yellow cards as well. He's picked up a few less yellow cards this season. And we know that he can maintain goal threat over an elongated period where we don't necessarily know that yet with Saliba. So for me, I slightly prefer Gabriel to Saliba. And therefore, for that reason, I've got Saliba down as the 7th best Arsenal asset from these 8 options here. I've got Gabriel as my favourite defender. If you don't mind someone that's a slightly bigger rotation risk, I do think that Zinchenko has the highest upside of all of the defenders. I just think he plays the most advanced role. He's got the best non-penalty expected goal involvement, not only across the season for Arsenal from the defenders, but also since the World Cup, since post-World Cup. So I really like Zinchenko. As you can see, a 0.21 big chance involvement per 90 as well. So if you don't mind him being a slight rotation risk, obviously with Tierney, I like Zinchenko, but for me, I would just go for the very safe asset. Like I said, with all of the fixtures we've got coming up, double 23, double 25, blank game week 28, where we know Arsenal will play, I think you want to be confident that your asset plays. He's got a little bit of goal threat, decent for bonus points, less likely to pick up a yellow. I like Gabriel as an option. So for me, if I was choosing the ideal defender at the moment, it would be Gabriel. Moving on to the attackers, I've got Martinelli, Nketiah, ODEGAARD, and Saka, the 3 midfielders plus Nketiah. When we're looking at just data, let's ignore expected minutes for the moment. You can see that Nketiah is the standout option post-World Cup and across the season as well. Whenever he makes appearances, he puts up good data. He's got the highest projected points. He's got over 1 big chance involvement per 90 at 1.17. So this is big chances created plus big chances himself. So he's getting involved at least a big chance every 90 minutes. And his non-penalty expected goal involvement is 0.76, which is really, really strong. So for me, Nketiah, without minutes being an issue, is the best Arsenal asset. Of course, the issue is that Jesus is coming back soon. Now, I think that the estimation is around game week 25, you would be ready to maybe start again. If that is the case, obviously they have the double in 25, and then you'd also probably want that asset for blank game week 28 when Arsenal are guaranteed to have a fixture. Can we confirm that Nketiah starts in 28? Almost definitely not. Can we confirm that he probably starts both in 23 and maybe going into 24? Yes, unless Jesus just gets rushed straight back in. I think Nketiah is fine for the next couple, and maybe I would feel relatively confident he'll play at least one in double 25, maybe both, but we'll have to see what happens with Jesus. So it is a shorter term transfer. And with transfers being so valuable with all of the blanks and doubles, we'll probably have a double 26 and or 27 too. We've got double game week 29, blank game week 32. Do you want to waste a transfer, bringing in an Arsenal asset that you're going to have to take straight back out, when some of the other options, like a Gabriel, maybe ODEGAARD and SAKA, are slightly more nailed? So that's the decision you've got to make yourself. I can't make that decision for you. Depends on the rest of your team. If you are happy to, I do still, like I said, I do still believe that he's got the greatest upside, the greatest goal threat, and I think Nketiah, numbers-wise, is the best Arsenal asset to own. Then you can see Martinelli, ODEGAARD and SAKA all have exactly the same non-penalty expected goal involvement according to Fantasy Football Hub of 0.51 post-World Cup. So all three of them are putting up decent, not unbelievable data. So the numbers would suggest, if we're ignoring minutes, that Martinelli, ODEGAARD and SAKA are equally good options post-World Cup. Across the season, Saka's got the worst non-penalty expected goal involvement, and then ODEGAARD and Martinelli are very similar. So I would say, looking at this, I love Martinelli as an option. I would definitely keep him. He's definitely involved. He's got good goal threat. He's got good assist threat. He takes set pieces. The issue we've got is he is now a minutes threat. I think with Trossard signing, with Smith Rowe coming back, he is a minutes threat. And I think he will continue to get early substitutions. And at some point, it could be soon, it could be in the future, I think that Trossard will get a game starting for Arsenal. I just think that Arteta will trial that for Arsenal, and I could see that happening before Game Week 25, potentially. Now, Arsenal fans might disagree. I still think Martinelli is first choice, but that would worry me slightly. And the minutes issues that we're going to have with Martinelli just makes me think that with the two doubles they've got, again, you wanting them for 28 and just not wanting that headache, now might be the time to sell Martinelli. And I feel like the longer you go without selling him, the more it justifies keeping him. So I feel like you either sell him now, even if it's for a hit, get ODEGAARD and SAKA in, who are the more nailed options, bite the bullet on whatever that hit may be, and just have the best Arsenal triple up that you can. The longer you leave it, it probably makes less sense, because let's say you leave it until game week 26, 27, well then Arsenal might not have a double game week 29, so you might end up wanting to sell one of your Arsenal assets anyway. So I feel like you've got to do it now. If you're going to sell Martinelli, you do it now. You are probably going to have to do it for a -4 unless you're in a really good position. I don't dislike it though, and to be honest, at the moment, my lined up transfer for game week 22, for game week 23, I should say, is probably Martinelli to ODEGAARD. So let's finish with ODEGAARD and SAKA. Really good data. Like I said, similar to Martinelli, slightly greater big chance involvement for the two of them. The reason that I think they are the first and second best Arsenal assets is not the numbers, it's the minutes. And I know I keep driving home this minutes thing, and you say, well, I'd rather play with greater data but less minutes. What you can see here is their statistics per 90, right? A non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90, big chance involvement per 90. If the player's not getting 90 minutes, all of a sudden you reduce this. If Nketiah gets 70 minutes, his data no longer looks good. If Martinelli's only getting 60, 70, the data's probably nowhere near as good, right? With ODEGAARD and SAKA, they're going to get 90 minutes in most games. And I just think that makes them such good assets at the moment. With the doubles they've got coming up and with them playing in 28, I want my Arsenal assets to play 90 minutes in pretty much every game. So for that reason, ODEGAARD and SAKA have to be 1 and 2 for me. The reason I've got ODEGAARD slightly ahead is across the season his data is better. He's got slightly higher big chance involvement. And he's also cheaper. If they were the same price, I would say they're virtually the same asset, but I would still probably just about favour ODEGAARD. But the fact that he's 1.3 million cheaper, I definitely prefer him as an asset personally. So my ideal Arsenal triple up, to summarise that and put that all together, would be ODEGAARD, SAKA, and then depending whether you want to go really aggressive short term or whether you want to build for the long term, it would be one of Nketiah and Gabriel. I do like the fact that you can cover the Arsenal defence. I like the fact that you've then got a defender that doubles in 23, 25 and plays in 28 in someone like a Gabriel. But I also think that the triple Arsenal attack is very aggressive and you could get a lot of goals and a lot of points over the coming weeks. You've just got to take into account that Jesus is going to be back soon. Obviously, if he gets a knockback in his recovery, which happens with players, fingers crossed it doesn't for him, but it does happen, you might just be like avoiding bringing in Nketiah, avoid bringing in Nketiah because Jesus is coming back. Maybe he's eased in really slowly, picks up another one. So you could just take the risk that Jesus comes back a little bit slower than we think, or that there might be issues with a recurring injury. And maybe Nketiah is fine until game week 28, game week 29. So I don't have an issue with him, but I feel like the safest 3 players to bring in at the moment is probably one of like Gabriel and Saliba, the most 2 now defenders, plus ODEGAARD and SAKA. Let me know down below in the comments, what is your Arsenal triple up going to be for game week 23? Just to confirm, please do triple up on Arsenal. They're the best team in the league. They've got great data, really cheap assets for the most part. And they're going to double, I've really repeated myself here, but double in 23, double in 25, and play in blank game week 28. So I think they are excellent assets to own. It just depends on what triple up you want to take into game week 23. I feel like with the Manchester City assets, it's a little bit easier because I don't think there are quite as many assets to consider. I haven't got Grealish on this list. I know a lot of people are looking at him. I personally just prefer MAHREZ. A lot of Grealish's numbers tend to be made up through expected assist, but I also just don't think, I don't like him as an FPL asset. I'll be completely honest. Yes, he does pick up the odd assist here and there, but he's not a goal threat, and I do still think he's prone to rotation. And whilst Foden's out, yes, there's no rotation with him, and I know Foden is out of favour, but I do think sooner rather than later, once Foden's back and fit, I still think that Foden is the better asset ahead of Grealish. So for that reason, Grealish isn't on this list. But if you can't afford MAHREZ or KDB and you still want a City asset, consider it. But for me, if you can't afford one of MAHREZ and KDB, I just wouldn't go for another City attacker. So I've got Lewis, Akanji and Ake as the three defenders that I would potentially look at owning. And then MAHREZ, Haaland and KDB as the three attackers. Let's start with Haaland. Just to show you here, his numbers post World Cup have been good. There has been a little drop off, but they're still virtually the best in the Premier League. Almost 1 non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90, over 2 big chance involvement per 90, the highest projected points in the league. Haaland is still the best asset in FPL for me. I would still heavily consider triple captaining him if you haven't in 23. If you haven't already used it, I would consider using it in 23. The only thing that would put me off slightly is that Aston Villa do defend quite well under Emery, especially against the bigger teams. Very small sample size, but they do look quite good and quite tight at the back. And then the second fixture is Arsenal away, arguably one of the hardest, if not the hardest fixtures at the moment in FPL. So I think there might be better opportunities in the future. It's still worth your consideration. For me, I haven't considered captaining anyone else. If Nketiah had like a much better double, I might consider it. But the fact that obviously Nketiah has also got a slightly tricky double because he has to play against Manchester City, I don't think I want to go for anyone else. I'll be captaining Haaland. Maybe consider using your triple if you've not already used it. The other two players, MAHREZ and KDB, as you can see here, it paints a pretty clear picture post-World Cup. MAHREZ is the better asset to own at the moment. He's getting more minutes, he's got higher projected points, he's got better big chance involvement, and he's got slightly higher non-penalty expected goal involvement. And not only has he got totally better non-penalty expected goal involvement, he's also got better sort of combination. So his XG is a lot higher than KDB's, and it's pretty equal mix for MAHREZ between expected goals and expected assists. So he is both a goal threat and he's creating 2. Whereas KDB's is actually 0.6 expected assist and 0.14 expected goals. So pretty much all of KDB's data is made up through assist threat. He's not a goal threat at all. He's not getting those big chances and he's not getting the opportunity to score goals. And for a £12.4 million asset, I want them to be scoring goals, or at least getting the opportunity to score goals. And at the moment, KDB's not getting that. And he's a minutes risk at the moment as well. Now, of course, MAHREZ is a minutes risk, absolutely. But he's only 7.7 million, and at the moment he's playing more minutes than KDB. In this double, I would be shocked if KDB doesn't play both. But thinking long term, the way that it's going at the moment, I wouldn't be surprised if MAHREZ gets a similar amount, if not more minutes than KDB. The only thing that would put me back in favour of KDB is 2 things. I think KDB serves as a really nice placeholder for Salah. It makes sure that you don't spend that money elsewhere. With the double that Liverpool have in 25, you might not want Salah anyway, which is absolutely fine. We'll discuss that maybe in future videos. But it's nice that you don't worry about spending that money elsewhere. You have him as a nice placeholder. You're not tempted to spread the funds around your defence or around your attack. And when the time comes, you then have that option to move to Salah if you want to. And the other reason that I kind of like KDB is historically he's been a great asset. Historically, he's played lots of minutes for Pep. And I think if you were to say that one of these 2 players gets benched 3 games in a row, I would bet my house that it was MAHREZ. I think KDB is a rotation risk, but you never expect with KDB for him to be benched repeatedly in a row, whereas MAHREZ in the past has had performances like this, and then Pep goes and drops him for 6 games in a row. So whilst at the moment MAHREZ is the hot flavour for Pep, and Pep really likes him on that right wing, and there's not much competition, I wouldn't be surprised to see that change pretty quickly because that's what Pep does. Whereas KDB is one of his main players, and I think historically we've seen that even if he goes through a couple of games where he's benched a little bit, he'll then start again in the future. So for me, I think MAHREZ at the moment is the better asset, especially when you consider how much cheaper he is. £4.7 million cheaper. So if you're buying new this week, maybe let's say you went from like KDB to Bruno, and you've got to decide, do you want to go from Bruno back to KDB or to MAHREZ? I would go for MAHREZ and use the money elsewhere, as long as you're happy maybe missing out on the opportunity to bring in Salah in Gameweek 25. So at the moment, MAHREZ is the asset to own. For the defenders, Lewis, Akanji and Ake, these are the 3 that I would be tempted by. I'm not going to talk about it for a long time because I honestly don't know who's the most nailed. I would just about probably suggest Ake. Just the comments from Pep make it sound like Ake is one of his favourite players. He can play both left back and left centre back. I would argue that he is first choice left back and probably second or third choice left centre back. And that just makes him super flexible because if he ever doesn't play at left back, there's still the opportunity to play at left centre back. And I just think that every time I watch him play, he looks like City's most assured defender. So I think Ake is still the most nailed. Would I expect him to play both in the double? I've got no idea. And this is the issue that we have with City defenders. Akanji might be as nailed, maybe even more at the moment with the injuries that they've got. But Stones will come back in soon, and that will obviously take minutes off of him. And also his goal threat isn't that great. You can see 0 big chance involvement and 0.05 non-penalty expected goal involvement. So with Akanji, you're not getting much goal threat. You're not even getting many bonus points either. He's a bit of a 6-point merchant. And similar to what we've seen with Walker and Ederson, I don't think you're getting much upside with him. So for 5 million, I don't like him that much as an option personally. And then Lewis at 3.9, there's justification to go for him because it's a really cheap, and I mean really cheap, Manchester City defender with the best data, non-penalty expected goal involvement of 0.16, big chance involvement of 0.22 per 90. So of all of the City defenders, he's getting the most goal threat, the most assist threat, and he looks like a pretty nailed asset at the moment. He's the only City defender that can comfortably and naturally play that inverted fullback role, so the Cancelo role we can call it, where they drift in and play almost like as a central defensive midfielder. I do think that Ake and Laporte could play that role on occasion, but generally, unless Pep changes his tactics completely and moves away from the inverted fullback, which I don't think we'll see, Lewis is realistically probably going to get quite a few minutes, so I don't mind him. But the issue is we don't know what Pep's going to do. We could quite easily see him try similar with Laporte and Ake, and I don't think he will absolutely flog Lewis personally, so I still don't think he's completely nailed. And for all of the reasons that I've just listed, and thinking that none of these are massive goal threats, none of them are putting up incredible data, the fact that they are rotation risks, and also the fact that they are likely to blank in Game Week 28, they don't double in 25. With some of the other assets we've got, like a Tarkowski or a Gabriel, I think that, or a Mings who plays in 25 and 28, or like I said, a Kilman or a Dawson who doubles in 25 and might play in 28 potentially. You've got enough assets, I think, in defence for cheaper, with maybe greater goal threat that you could equally go for, that you know are going to start every game. So for me, I would probably, the number 3 options would be Tarkowski, Mings, or an Arsenal defender. I would prefer all of them personally ahead of the City defence. So if you don't own a City defender currently, I don't think I would go out and buy one. But if you are, I would still just about lean in favour of Ake, but don't be surprised if you see them getting benched soon. Let me know down below, how many assets will you own from Manchester City for Game Week 23, and what is your current 2 or 3 players that you will own? So just to quickly summarise and recap the previous 2 sections and discuss the key questions around Arsenal Man City assets, I'll rattle through these because I've answered most of them. Would I sell Martinelli for Saka or ODEGAARD for a -4 hit? Yes, and I would do that this week. I think the longer you leave it, the less fixtures you get. And over a couple of weeks, Martinelli could absolutely outscore Saka and ODEGAARD. But I think long-term, just due to the additional minutes that you're getting with the other 2, I think they will outscore Martinelli. So like I said, the longer you leave it, the worse the transfer gets and the less it justifies a hit. The sooner you do it, the better for me. I will almost definitely be selling Martinelli to one of ODEGAARD or Saka this week. Probably ODEGAARD for the price, but also just the fact that his data is slightly better as well. Jesus is back in training now. I don't know if he's back in full training, but he's definitely back in training in some regard. Is Nketiah a risk? Like I said, I think for the next few, you're probably fine. But moving from sort of 25, 26 onwards, yes, Nketiah is probably a risk. Is it worth doing anyway? Potentially. I've already got him, and I'm very happy to own him. If I didn't buy him last week, though, it's a bit like what I've said with Martinelli. The longer you leave it, the less I like the transfer. So if you're going to get Nketiah, I would argue this is probably your last week to do it. I don't hate it, and I think arguably the Arsenal attacking triple-up of ODEGAARD, Saka, and Nketiah is the best triple-up that you can have when you're looking at upside. MAHREZ or KDB if money is not an issue. Even if money is an issue, I just think that at the moment, MAHREZ is the better asset. I think long-term across the season, I would back KDB to outscore him. And I think at some point soon, we'll see a much more nailed KDB that's producing points, and we'll see a slightly less nailed MAHREZ, and all order will be resumed. But for now, MAHREZ is probably the better asset, even if they were the same price. But especially considering you're saving 4.7 million, I think I do genuinely prefer MAHREZ. But as we'll see in a sec, you don't necessarily need either if you don't want to. Who is the best Man City defender? Ake, Lewis, Akanji, Ederson. Definitely not Ederson. He's a 6-point merchant at best. 2 points a lot of the other weeks. I think that all 3 of the others are relatively nailed and will play the majority of games at the moment. But I think that Ake is probably the safest bet long-term again, just because he's the first choice left-back and he can play at left centre-back if they have further injuries to their centre-backs. And then finally, like I said, do we need a City triple-up? I would argue you only need one City asset. It's the only one you need, which is Haaland. The additional one of MAHREZ and KDB, I do think is probably worthwhile for Game Week 23, 24, and 25. After that, I would potentially look to sell them. Maybe in Game Week 25, you could look to move to a Salah, but obviously City have Bournemouth. So maybe 26 onwards, I'd be looking at selling your MAHREZ and your KDB. Haaland is fine. I don't think you need a triple up, but if you want a triple up, that's fine. And if you're already on a triple up, I wouldn't be selling your City assets before a double game week. But at the moment, City aren't performing great, but also, whilst as a team they tend to perform well and put up good data, if your player's not getting enough minutes, if they're getting rotated at all, I would just prefer to go for other nailed assets that may be playing 28 as well and maybe doubling one of the future weeks. So for me, no, you don't need a City triple up, but I equally think it's still a good option. And I would expect City to start to improve very soon. So hopefully I've answered all of your Arsenal Man City questions. If there are any questions that I've not yet answered, please do let me know down below. Let's now move on to a wildcard team. And even if you're not wildcarding, this discussion should still be useful. So I think a nice way to bring this entire video together and discuss all of the things that we've spoken about with double 23, double/blank 25, and also blank 28, and some of the assets that we've discussed, I thought I'd present a wildcard team to you. Now, I'm not wildcarding. You may not be planning on wildcarding. If you are, this should be very useful. But even if you're not, it will give you an idea of the sort of players that I'd be targeting and the general structure that I'll be looking at for the coming weeks. So this is a 3-4-3, 1.7 million in the bank. So my team value is still decent. It has dropped a little bit in recent weeks, but if you can't afford this, hopefully you should be able to, considering there's 1.7 in the bank. But there are a couple of places that you could potentially downgrade. Now, what I'm thinking myself when I'm building my team, thinking about transfers and also this wildcard, is, again, it's been very repetitive, but double 23 is obviously the one straight in front of us. We've then got blank game week / double game week 25, where you don't want to own any of the 4 that blank, or you don't want to own more than 3 of the 3 players from the 4 teams that blank. And you also are now looking at those 4 teams that double in 25. And then we're also looking ahead to blank game week 28. Yes, you can free hit in blank game week 28 or 25 if you want to, but I think there will be better opportunities in the future. And I actually think it's going to be relatively straightforward to navigate game week 28, looking at the teams that already are guaranteed a fixture without using a free hit, especially if you start thinking about it now. So the players that I think are going to be useful in your wildcard and looking at long term, Arsenal, like I said, double 23, double 25, play in blank game week 28. Everton, double in 23, play in 25, and play in 28. So Everton assets are worth looking at. And Aston Villa, they don't double in any of the upcoming double game weeks at the moment anyway, but they do play in 25 and play in 28. So I think those assets can form a really decent part of your team. So as you can see, and also Chelsea as well. Chelsea playing both 25 and 28, and they're starting to look a little bit better defensively. I'm sure they'll start to click in the attack soon. So as you can see here, I've got Kepa and James, who play in 25 and play in 28. So I've got 2 assets immediately there. I've got a goalkeeper sorted for the next 2 blanks, and I've also got Reece James, who, assuming he continues to get minutes and doesn't get injured again, I do think will be a serious FPL asset. He always is when he's fit. I know he's a bit of a troll, but I would still include him on my wildcard team. I've got the best Arsenal triple up for safety and minutes. I've got Gabriel, ODEGAARD and SAKA. The other reason for that is my forward slots are currently full, but if you wanted to go for Nketiah instead of one of the attackers, you could, and then go for a different defender. But I really like Gabriel, ODEGAARD and SAKA just for safety and for expected minutes. And then as you can see, my bench is currently full of players that play in 25 and 28. So I've got Bailey and Mings as 2 players that play in both of those blanks. And I've got Tarkowski as, again, a player that doubles in 25 and plays in 28 too. Also, Everton look like they will also play in blank game week 32. So Everton, for that reason, are just a really nice. I wish they had more assets to choose from, but I feel like Tarkowski is just such an obvious pick on your wildcard, or if you're looking for a cheaper defender, not just because he scored recently, but also just because he's a cheap asset that we know is nailed. And again, Dyche does definitely target set pieces, so we could see more goals in the future. So I feel like that foundation there sorts you out really, really nicely. I do have 2 assets that blank in 25 in Trippier and Rashford. I've sold Luke Shaw on this wildcard here because I feel like if you were building a team now, there's just not value in having him because Manchester United definitely blank in 25 and there's I think it's about a 92% chance. I'll try and remember to flash it on screen. I think Ben Crellin said it's about a 92% chance that Manchester United blank in 28 as well. So I just don't feel like it makes sense to put loads of Manchester United players in your team when they've got 2 upcoming blank weeks. So you can essentially keep Trippier and Rashford through blank 25 because you've got all of the other assets that play. So it's not going to be an issue for your team. I wouldn't sell either of those on a wildcard. I would definitely keep them. If you wanted to move Rashford on, you could. But the way that he's scoring goals and assists in that moment, I just don't think there's much justification to do so. Then I've got 2 Man City assets to deal with the double. They're the only 2 I own. Like I said, at the moment, I can't justify spending the extra money on KDB over MAHREZ, and I don't really like the defenders. So for me at the moment, MAHREZ and Haaland is enough. I've got Kane in there as my second premium alongside Haaland. You could have Saka. You could have Salah because of the double game week 25 for Liverpool. I'm still not convinced by Liverpool enough to have Salah in there instead of Kane. And I'm still not I still don't think that Salah at the moment is performing well enough personally for me to have him in there instead of Harry Kane. Same with KDB as well. I know I've just sold Kane and I still own KDB, but if I was building a fresh team now, I would prefer to just have MAHREZ instead of KDB and keep Kane. He's putting up really good data. He's consistently scoring goals. He's on penalties. Kane could be used, though, to move to Salah if you want to in 25. So maybe you start like this, and then you move to Salah in 25 as part of a 2-transfer move. You could do that if you want to, but I feel like Kane's a bit of a set and forget at the moment, and you can maybe move the other pieces of your team around if you want to. Just worth noting, there is a reasonable chance that Spurs, again, I would have hopefully flashed it on screen, there is a decent chance that Spurs blank in Gameweek 28, so you might have to sell Kane then anyway, but Liverpool and City could also blank. So if that happens, then you're probably going to have a premium that blanks regardless. The final player in the 11 is Darwin Núñez. Now, I know a lot of people, I've had a sort of love-hate relationship with him, mainly love this season, and I know he doesn't convert his big chances, but I feel like on a wildcard, having one of Salah or Darwin in place makes sense. A lot of people will be scrambling to get one of them for the double, and I know you might say, I don't want Liverpool assets, Darwin and Salah aren't worth it, they don't convert their chances. When double game week 25 comes around, you are going to want a Liverpool asset. Especially, let's say that Liverpool do fairly well in 23 against Everton, maybe do fairly well in game week 24. All of a sudden, Darwin and Salah have got 2 goals in 2, and you're thinking, I might want them. I would just take a punt on one of them in your wildcard team. So for me, just due to the fact that his data's slightly better and the fact that he's cheaper and doesn't take up one of those valuable midfield slots, and I really like the midfield 4 that I've got, I've currently got Darwin in there as the other option. So that's the team. Hopefully that makes sense, the justification for all of those picks. That would be my ideal midfield, and it's frustrating because I don't own ODEGAARD, SAKA, MAHREZ. I don't own Gabriel. I don't own Darwin or Kane. So when I'm looking at the ideal wildcard team for me, my team is quite far away from this, especially with such a strong bench for the upcoming blanks as well. But let me know how close your team is to this. If you are wildcarding, hopefully that was helpful for you. And make sure to let me know down below in the comments if there are any questions that I haven't answered in today's video. I'll do my best to help you out. So guys, there you have it. That is the double game week 23 preview. Hopefully this was helpful. A look ahead to blank/double game week 25. An even further look ahead to blank game week 28. And just thinking about how we're going to navigate and maneuver the upcoming game weeks in FPL. If this video has been useful to you, please drop a like on it. Let's try and hit 2,000 likes on today's video. Make sure to subscribe as well. And like I said, let me know down below in the comments what any of your dilemmas are, and I'll do my best to reply to as many of you as I possibly can. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.